Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lizard Brains podcast. I'm your host, DJ Alessandrini. I'm joined by my co-host, Tom Gorman. Tom, how's it going?
I'm good. I'm extra excited because today we have maybe the guest of guests. I'm not sure. He doesn't need an introduction, but he deserves one, so I'm going to try. He's the author of Speed Secrets, which is actually 9 books, I just learned. I have a question about that. He's the host of the Speed Secrets podcast, the It's Not the Car podcast. He's made a living in motorsports the way most of us dream of, and I would say he's kind of the coach's coach. Ross Bentley, how's it going?
It is going great. Don't know about that intro thing, but yeah, okay. Thank you.
You deserve it. Yeah.
We call you the coach's coach all the time on this podcast, just FYI.
Oh,
Yep.
okay, yeah. Well, wonder who the coach's coach is. I'm thinking about that right now. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know who that would
I
be.
think that's like dividing by 0. I think at that point it just starts to cancel out.
Well, I mean, the coach's coach would be whoever helped you become a better coach, Ross. Was there anybody like
Yeah.
that?
Actually, well, every driver that I've ever worked with
There it
has
is.
helped me be a better coach. Yeah. So
I agree with that though. Like in my time coaching, sometimes you get like a client where it just pushes you to that next level of like your descriptions or your understanding or the way you build camaraderie. And yeah, definitely.
for sure, actually, I've been working with a driver in IMSA the last, well, club racing, starting with a gentleman driver who started about 6 years ago in racing and has been in IMSA for the last few years. And he has pushed me more than any other driver that I've ever worked with, I think. And he's made me a way better coach.
Yeah, cool.
Interesting. Can you what about it? Is it the fact that the person has a higher ceiling, so they're pushing you to find the details that they need to really break through to that last level, or is it because their learning style? We'll just jump right in. Like, what is it about that that
Wha-
makes it so challenging?
I'm going to say yes to both of those things, but I'm going to say the bigger thing I think is I have some basic philosophies about the way people perform. And he didn't necessarily work in the way that I looked at things. And I had to change my thinking. And I'm going to say that was the biggest part of it was just, I was really big on focus on your performance and the results will come. And this fellow is so competitive and so, different. What makes him tick is different. And that is, like I said, it made me rethink a lot of things that I'd been doing for a number of years.
So would you say like this driver, like, cause we talk about the same thing where it's like you focus on the task at hand and where the cards fall, like that's where it is. If you didn't win, like you can get better than what you currently performed, but if you focus on the task, that's what's going to bring out like your best self, right? Like the listeners of
Yep.
our podcast have heard that till or me and Tom are blue in the face. Are you saying that this is the enigma of that rule of like is he actively like driving the car thinking about the results and somehow that nets a better performance?
At times. No, I will say that, 6.5 years ago, he had never been on a racetrack in his life. Had probably didn't know how to spell race car 6.5 years ago. So had gone from absolute zero at starting at the age of 51 to winning the LMP2 class at Le Mans, winning, putting the car on pole and winning IMSA P2 races with co-drivers. And so he's had this massive learning curve, which, as we all know, is not a curve. But um, he, it's only been, I'm going to say, in the past year where he's actually starting to come around to that. But there were times, year 2, 3, 4 in this thing, and I would dangle a lap time at him. I'd go, "Hey, here's a lap time you got to hit." And for most drivers, as you probably know, you've probably experienced, you dangle a lap time in front of them, and they just start going crazy. They lose their mind, and I don't. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but
Yeah, I
they
get it though.
don't they don't perform at their best because they're trying so hard. Well, this driver, I just like, okay, you need to go 0.6 of a second faster. and he would do it. He could will things to happen. Now, I will say that in the past year, as he's gotten even better, and at the pointier of the pointier end of the point, he has had to he's had to dial some of that back and turn it back to what you guys and I've been in since the beginning, right? As focus on the task, focused on your performance, the result will come. And so it's been a way to get there has been different. And I had to ask myself, why was it not working when I did that earlier on? And it's just everybody is different. Uh,
Yeah. That's interesting. I kind of ties to kind of the root of this podcast. DJ and I met in 2017. While he was fairly new to driving and fairly new to autocross. That's where we both come from, autocross and in a way sim racing, actually, which we'll get to. But
yeah.
the whole, like, the big question that he and I developed our relationship off of almost was the idea of talent versus effort. And he was the first one to really challenge me in a way that made me think about, does talent even exist? Is that a thing that is is a thing for a driver? Can you just be a better driver naturally? And
Because
I had to push my thoughts about it because it was way more nuanced. Go ahead, DJ.
yeah, up until this point, like the only thing Tom ever heard was, "Oh, you're so talented at this. Oh, you're such a talented driver. This, that, that." And Tom never really thought about all the effort that went in that he didn't even feel like was work before he actually drove a real car. So like whether it was like karts, because his dad owned a karting place, like later in Tom's like driving development, but like Tom like went nuts on sim racing as a kid just because it was a fun thing to do. But like all those little things that he like picked up on and learned, he he didn't even notice that the like he was putting in the work to be a better driver
Yeah.
before he ever even was like, "Hey, I should try to get good at this driving thing." Like that never happened for Tom. He just showed up on site good at the driving thing. So the illusion to like everyone else was that like this is this super talented individual that's like oozing with like this natural born ability. But my argument is nobody's actually naturally born to drive a car around a racetrack. Like that's just not in like the human evolutionary like manner. Now, I will say, I think there's certain attributes of people that might give them an advantage, like on the initial learning process of driving the car. But I want to believe, just from a growth mindset, that any part of driving is like a workable, like you can work through any part of it.
I'm glad to hear that Tom did do all that stuff because I had so many people go, "Man, this Tom O'Gorman guy, do you know about him? He is so talented." And I'd see him drive and I go, "Holy crap, this guy's good. Like, he is so talented." So I'm glad to hear that, Tom, you did a little bit of work along the way, because I'm like you, DJ. I'm not going to say that what somebody is born with is not a factor. Certain people have, I don't know if it's in the DNA or whatever, but just some things around, mm, hand-eye coordination. Certainly, I'm going to say our sport relies less on your physical build. You know, you're if you're 5'8", you're probably not gonna make it in the NBA. Uh, if you weigh
Yeah, right.
140 pounds, you're probably not gonna make it in the NFL, right? So there are certain sports that have certain physical limitations or not limitations, but qualities that are needed. Motorsport is less of that. No, sure, there are certain cars that if you're if you're 280 pounds, you're gonna have a struggle to get into. Uh,
Sure.
so there's that. So I'm like you, DJ. I believe that more of it is what somebody has done with that talent. Whatever they were born with, it's what they've done with it. You mentioned growth mindset, and I don't know. I'm thinking that you've maybe come across Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. Um,
I believe
is
I've
that
I've read probably dozens of like performance psychology books at this point, so they all kind
okay?
of like mix together.
Yeah. So it's actually I'm gonna probably rate it in my for sure the top 5 books that I've ever read in my life is Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck, and it talks about a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And I'm the worst thing you can ever say to somebody, and this is like a coaching thing, is the worst thing you can say to somebody is, "Wow, you are just naturally talented," or
Yeah.
"You are just naturally smooth," or "You are just naturally," because that triggers this fixed mindset around, well, I was born with this, and therefore I don't have to work at it. And by the way, I'm actually afraid to, this is going on way in the back of somebody's brain. I'm afraid to put myself out there because if I don't do well, that means I wasn't born with all this natural talent.
Yeah,
That means
exactly.
I'm not that great. So rather than somebody with a growth mindset is somebody that goes, doesn't matter where I'm at today, I can get better. And so if you have somebody who's really, really good, the best thing you can say to them is something along the lines of, wow, you worked hard to get there. Like, great job. Well done. You worked at that. You made that happen. And then that's the reward is, oh, so the harder I work at this, the better I get. And uh, I don't know. I will tell you that I have seen, dis- I've been disappointed so many times in motorsport when I see somebody who has this ability. Maybe they could be 14, they could be 18, they can be 38, and they've got this ability, whether they've, you know, whether they were born with it or not, I don't know where it came from, but they're really, really good. And along the way, they've been told they're really, really good. And because of that, they don't work hard at it. They don't work to improve it. And I've seen so many of them not not live up to their potential, not do what I believe they could have done. On the flip side of that, I've seen so many, again, 14, 18, 28, 60 year olds who, when you first watch them, you go, they're not special. They work at it and they work at it and they work at it and they work at it. And all of a sudden you go, maybe they were special because they were really, really good now.
Yeah, like they just never stop. We're gonna go on a quick break to fix the clicking, and then we'll be right back.
All right, so let me ask you this, Ross, about your own experience then, because you obviously have your own uh I'm jealous of racing career, racing Daytona and kart and IndyCar and all this awesome stuff. What was your experience with learning to drive the car, and how does that correlate to maybe sometimes learning to speak to somebody else in their language rather than your language?
Well, uh, this is going to come as a big shock to you listeners. I probably the only driver ever in history of motorsport that didn't have any money and had to figure out a way to make it work. I know,
No.
pretty unusual, right?
Whoa, what?
Yeah. Uh, uh, so yeah, like 99.9% of drivers out there, you're always trying to figure out what is it that's going to work. Like, how do I make up for the fact that I don't have all the money in the world? I can't afford to do some of the things that I know that others are able to do. So, uh, I don't know. I looked in as many different ways as I could to try to figure out how to do this. And yeah, I studied on my own sort of sports psychology. I, dug into engineering. I'm going to say I asked a lot of questions to help me figure out what is going to get me to where I want to go. Like, what do I need to do? And uh, so by doing that, I think I figured out what worked for me. And this is not me just saying it for the sake of saying it. I actually don't think I'm all that smart. And because I'm not that smart, I have to dumb things down for me to understand it. And that has helped me explain it to other people. Because and I'm not saying that other people are not smart, but the 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 more you dumb it down, the easier it is for people to understand something. And like, I guess I try to look at it as, if I'm talking to an incredibly intelligent 15-year-old or 50-year-old, if I can talk to them like a 10-year-old, it's that much easier. Obviously not talking down to them, but just dumb it down as much as possible. And I think because I had to figure it out on my own, uh, it helped me kind of take what I was working on and figured it out to a point where, okay, I can actually now explain it to somebody else. And I guess ultimately that's what it takes to fully understand something is when you can explain it to somebody else. And I guess the other part of it is from day one, I had to figure out how to make a living, how to survive in this sport, and my side gig was teaching others how to do what I was loving to do. Um, so trying to figure it out in a way to explain it to them, I would then learn from doing that. As I learned that, I figured that out and then pass that on to somebody else as well. So I don't know. I yeah, I would love to say that in the beginning I had this grand plan that this is how it was going to work out. No, not a chance. No
Sure.
grand plan. Yeah.
That's I've never heard that someone verbalize it so well, but I relate to that a lot actually. I also don't fancy myself particularly smart in the sense of like big complex tasks and big word problems and stuff. Those always threw me off. I'm just like I've never been good at that. I need things to be pretty simple, straightforward. And it sounds like we're similar in that that self-taught journey. Actually, let me ask this quick. Have you ever did you ever have a coach, or what was your, your version of that while you were coming up as a driver? Did you ever have a role model or a person that like helped you click, or was it literally like I just got to figure this out as I go?
I can't say that I had a driver coach early on in my career. For sure, I did not. And I'm going to say for two main reasons. One is way back in time, the idea of a driver having a driver coach, that was just like the most bizarre thing did Mario Andretti and AJ Foyt have driver coaches? Not a chance, right? Uh,
Sure.
so there was sort of, I'm going to say it was even looked down upon if you had somebody teaching you, because kind of going back to the point earlier about talent is, well, if you need somebody to teach you how to do this, then you're not very talented.
Yeah, like,
So
what
I
just
think
put them in the car.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So so I think there was part of it was that, and then the other part of it was just, even if I did, I could not have afforded a coach. Now, having said that, uh, I did 2 years. I did my first races in a super modified and sprint cars on oval track, and then got a Formula Ford for 2 years, just figuring it out on my own, won a bunch of stuff. A guy that was building his own Formula Atlantic cars hired me, and I'm doing that in air quotes because he didn't pay me anything, but I didn't have to pay for everything, which was
Right.
pretty cool. And I rank him as one of the most intelligent people that I ever met in my life. He was a real engineer, had an engineering company that did like big engineering for buildings and stuff like that. But he was a motorsport guy and built race cars. I think I learned in the 3 or 4 years driving his cars, I think I learned more than most drivers learn in decades, just because he was that kind of a person. So you mentioned a mentor. I definitely Tom Johnson was a mentor to me. Uh, I don't think he ever once said, "You want to apex later," or "Get on the gas earlier here." Like he didn't talk about driving stuff, but general concepts about performance and doing things right, and even management and how you deal with people, and certainly the engineering part of it. Uh, I learned just so much from him. And I try not to just ramble on here, but later on when I was starting to do some IndyCar races, it was it was weird. I mean, no money, but helping or getting people to help pay for it. And there was in 1991, I guess it was. Yeah, 91. I was going to do one IndyCar race all season long. That was it. That was the only time I was going to drive on a track other than when I was teaching others. But driving a proper race car, that was the only time I was going to drive one IndyCar race. And about halfway through that year, I got introduced to a fellow who did some stuff around sort of the mental game of driving, Ron Langford. And he and I started working together, and he coached me on the mental game of driving. Yeah, again, I don't think Ron ever said brake later or apex earlier, or ain't nothing around the technical part of driving, but
Right.
a lot around the mental performance, and introduced me to some concepts, some ideas that kind of got me going down this path of the mental game. And I'm kind of the kind of person that if you get into something, get in it fully. And I was like, okay, I got to learn everything I can about sports psychology, mental game kind of stuff. Um, so, Ron was certainly a mentor, coach as well. Um, but there was only one time, only one time where I was at a track driving a race car, and I had somebody say, "I'm going to coach you." And it was actually not too long ago in the Thunder Hill 25-hour race. Tom, you were probably there. What year was it when we had like the massive like rain nonstop and the track was covered in mud? Was that
Oh my God.
20
2019, I think.
2019? So
Yeah.
um
I remember
oh,
seeing
I'm and
pictures from that race.
yeah, yeah. So was it 2019? Actually, it was 2018 when myself, Colin Brown, Naj Hussain, and John Bennett. Um, so Naj and John were gentleman drivers that co-drove with Colin and at times, but I'd coached all three of them. And now I was going to drive an LMP3 car at Thunder Hill in the 25-hour race with them. And they were like, okay, tables turned. We're going to coach you now. So it was kind of a funny thing. But um, and I'm going to say the other two, and sorry for rambling on here, guys.
No, that's
I
why we
just I
brought
just
you
want
on.
to why when you ask that, I'm kind of like, okay, who are the coaches, mentors? Two other people have been who have probably had the biggest impact in terms of coaching me and mentoring me. Both have the same last name, Brown. Jeff Brown, engineer, one of my longest time friends in motorsport, race engineer, my co-host on the It's Not the Car podcast, and one of them, and his son Colin. And I started coaching Colin when he was 12. I think I've learned more about driving and racing, coaching him and him coaching me back in that process than anyone else that way. So um,
So
coaches, mentors have been other drivers I've worked with. So
yeah,
yeah.
it kind of sounds like you came across people in your life, and and these were friends and like partners, and like it was like a team effort. But you came across people that like maybe they didn't tell you how to drive, but they were like giving you another light and how to solve problems, how to handle certain processes. And like you took like for example I have a goldfish brain, so I already forgot the engineer guy, what his name was, but
Jeff Brown.
that guy helped you like he had processes of like a step by step like flow chart of like problem solving, and you're like, oh, I can apply this to the way I drive or the way I approach this problem or stuff like that. So yeah, that honestly that totally makes sense. And Tom just posted a glorious picture of, was that when you were in the car, Tom? Because that car doesn't look like it's going very fast.
No, it wasn't me. But yeah, that race was nuts. It was literally for half the race, you had to drive in the only dry line around the entire racetrack if you went offline, which Ross, you did a lot if you were in the P3 car. I do not envy you at all in that race. Oh my God.
Well, and actually, I mistaken that it was actually I drove that Nissan GTR the year that the track was covered in the mud, which was absolutely brilliant, and we won our class in that because of
Sure.
that. But yeah, that was the most bizarre. Tom, it was the track was covered in so much mud. I went back there in February, so the race was first weekend of December, right? I went back there in February to coach somebody driving an LMP3 car, and the track was still had mud embedded in the surface.
That's
Like it was
crazy.
still brown most of the track. It
That
was
is
bizarre,
crazy.
wasn't it?
No
Yeah.
track
Yeah.
records were set that year. The track was crap forever.
I think there was a track record for the number of people off the track.
Yeah, that was the
Oh,
only
for
one.
sure.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So that's super interesting. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you painted it that way. That it was a lot of basically community that around you and the people you
Yeah.
surrounded yourself with, because we talk about that a lot with both of us are kind of taught that way. I never had a driver coach. DJ's never had a driver coach, and we have a community of people who listen to this podcast that it's like most of them are not going to be able to afford a coach, if not the other factors that go into getting a coach to the racetrack. But the amount you can learn with learning to teach yourself and learning to teach or learn from others, I guess actually, around you is super important. So let me ask: did you have a well? Do you think that driver coaches then misassume that their job is to teach someone how to drive by looking at the data and telling them to apex later and rather than looking at themselves as more of a sports psychologist, mental coach, uh, person that helps them build that skill set rather than like literally driving the car?
Yeah. And Tom, I know you've done a lot of coaching, DJ. I don't know how much you have, but have you had gonna because as a coach, what do you do more than anything else? You ask questions. So I'm asking you guys a question back at you here, and then come back to this, Tom, is have you have you ever been coaching a driver and you went, you know what? It'd be simpler if I just got in a car and drove, and yet they're not going to learn anything by me driving the car. And one of the things that I love about coaching is I could get into a car and I can drive it fast, but if I can say the right words and make somebody else go fast in that car, wow, that is I mean, that's harder. That's more challenging.
Oh yeah.
So, um, so ask your question again, Tom. Sorry.
Well,
Uh,
I asked this question because I'm realizing that this may be a trap I fall into, but do you think that coaches, or is your perspective of coaching that you can fall into a trap of focusing too much on the actual driving rather than the mentality behind the driving? And the mentality is way more valuable, really, but we get sucked into maybe this is the data, and look, you can go 3 miles an hour faster here, you can come off the brake a little sooner here, the practical application rather than the mind game.
yeah. Simple answer is yes. I think sometimes it's easy to get to kind of fall down that rabbit hole of let's look at the data, let's talk about the line. It's a whole lot easier to look at squiggly lines. It's a whole lot easier to draw an arc on a piece of paper, like through the line, through the corner. That's a whole lot easier than to look somebody in the eye and go, hmm, they don't seem very confident right now. Or you can tell sometimes when somebody it just hasn't clicked. They haven't figured it out. It hasn't become, as I say, part of their programming yet. And so I think in some ways, and this is not to take anything away from the technique, the instruction side of things, because that's important, but it's only part of the puzzle. And yeah, so I look at it as, we can teach somebody to do something. And by teaching, I think of that as I'm going to tell you, go do this. I can instruct you on how to do that, which is some telling, but it's also a little bit of maybe even some demonstration. Like, let me go and do a lap. Let me get some data. There's a lot of that. And then there's coaching. And coaching a lot of times is drawing out what it is the person already knows and typically by asking questions. Because when I ask that person a question, what would happen if you turned in later for that corner? What would happen if you got on the power earlier here? And if the driver goes, well, I think if I got on the power here, I would run out of track at the exit. I don't have to tell them, you're going to have to tighten the line or something. I don't have to tell them what to do. They've figured it out. So for sure, so I guess to really answer your question, Tom, and is I think that we can get focused on the details of the data and the line or the break points, those kinds of things, and miss that other stuff that you're talking about of the is the driver confident? Do they have a good clear mental picture of what it is they're trying to do? Um, have they learned how to learn? All of those kinds of things. And I've had people say, what is your coaching process? What is your coaching philosophy? And it's really simple. It's whatever it takes. If I'm working with a driver and they need to get more clear on where the apex of a corner is, we talk about that. If it's they need to, they're in a bad mood because something the team did or didn't do, or you know, yeah,
I'm mood prone. That's why I raised my hand.
uh, or that last session, that jerk in the blue car chopped me, and now I'm going to hunt him down and kill him on this next session.
Then you
Like
give them advice on how to commit murder. Like that's your job,
yeah,
Ross.
yeah, exactly. Like you want to get away with it, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
Yeah, you have to make it look like an accident. That's the key. Okay, let's look at some video. We're gonna
yeah,
talk this through.
yeah.
So I have a
So
question. Like how
yeah,
so obviously that conversation, that back and forth, that's where like all the biggest light bulbs for the racers gonna come through, right? Like what are some ways to encourage the conversation? Because sometimes when coaching, at least for me, like sometimes it I'm like trying to like bait a conversation to happen. And this doesn't happen with every client. It's just specific clients, and I find it's more the clients that tend to like have like a longer learning curve where you can't get that conversation to happen. What are some ways that you like get the conversation moving so you can have a back and forth, so you can actually start to see an insight into the like the logical processes and the ways that they're thinking about driving, and ways that you can go in there and try to adjust some of those things.
the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that is ask questions, and then let the silence do the talking.
Okay. It's uncomfortable sitting there when it's silent.
Yeah.
It's really uncomfortable, isn't
Yeah.
it? We as humans don't like this dead air space, and the number of times where I've asked a question and the driver will answer with I don't know, or there's not much conversation going, and sometimes you just have to wait. And it was actually a friend of mine who's a was like a business coach who said, "Let the silence do the talking." Sometimes just stop talking. And I think, I, again, sort of to your point, Tom, of you know, are we I- are we a teacher? Are we an instructor? Or are we a coach? And sometimes, as a teacher and instructor, we think we've got to put all this stuff into their head. And as a coach, I think sometimes we got to draw it out. And DJ, I just say, ask more questions, be okay with a little bit of silence, and then use my favorite follow-up question. If somebody says, I don't know, then you say, well, if you did know, what would it be?
I like that. I like that, yeah.
Because
Well, because you, like, get baited into the trap of, like, because you, like, want to help them, but
yeah,
but if you just, like, kinda half answer them or, like, give them a hint or whatever, then you're it's hard to actually think about it in the moment that, like, actually what you're doing is not helping them in that moment.
yeah, and a lot of times people will answer with a, I don't know, because that's easy.
Yeah.
But if just, and you can kind of joke about, well, if you did know, what would it be? And kind of put it back on them to think just another layer deeper kind of thing. So
Yeah.
um, I'm going to say that's the first part, and then so much of a coaching is it's relationship, right? And it's so much of relationships are about trust. So it's building that part of it. Uh, and sometimes you need to help them, with a little bit of, well, I don't know. Well, could it be this? What if it was this? I'm a great believer in just keep asking questions until they start to, you're making it easier for them to answer.
Yeah.
And then, and then a little bit later, it's dial that back a little bit and don't make it quite so easy. Like, make them keep thinking. Uh, but for sure, so much of it is building that relationship, and mm, um, they need to first off, they need to know that you've got their back.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what, you've got their back, and you're gonna support them. Now, sometimes the support's got to be, you know, I don't like the phrase tough love. I don't really like that, but
Yeah.
sometimes you've got to be blunt, but you can do that in a respectful way. I've worked with drivers who, uh, you know, you can be brutally honest to the point of insulting almost, and they like that. And others that, you give a little bit of
I
that
have
too much,
I
and
have
it's
one of
like,
those
"Oh,
right
this isn't
now.
gonna go."
I have one of those right now. I he literally wants me to be mean to him, and I'm like, I don't. That's so. That's not. I
Yeah.
can't. Yeah.
And some of that comes back to what's your personality, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
and sometimes you gotta
he
dial it up and dial it down a bit, but yeah.
he wants
Yeah.
me to be the driving factor between because I do a lot of sim racing coaching. That's like most of my coaching background, and so he wants me to like be like checking in on him, like, hey, I've noticed you haven't done any laps so far this week. What's up with that? Like that's what he wants, and that's like what he needs. So I definitely do that. But like he wants me to be like, hey, you lazy piece of shit. Like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah, and to me, that's what makes coaching so much fun is if every driver was exactly the same, I would have stopped this a long time ago. That's what makes it fun is figuring out how to reach that person. And
Yeah.
and some of them need conversation about apexes. Some of them need conversation about their mood and, what else is going on in their life. Um, and actually, maybe the last thing to your question, DJ, is make it enjoyable. And for some people, that's cracking jokes and having fun and laughing, right?
yeah,
For others, it's just, it doesn't have to be all laughing, but I think that if somebody's not enjoying it, they're not going to learn. It's not going to go very far.
yeah,
You're not going to
definitely.
have a
Yeah.
good relationship. So,
Yeah, people definitely are more of a sponge when they're having a good time.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting when you said that. How many drivers have you worked with? Either one of you have you worked with where you kind of feel like, well, you just need somebody to parent you, like, you know, did you do your homework tonight? You're not no dessert until you do your homework. Uh,
Yeah.
I always joke
there,
around about
there's
putting a shock collar on them because we're working through the internet. I'm like, there's got to be a Wi-Fi shock collar somewhere. Yeah,
yeah, the butt kicker seat that's actually no.
yeah, just electric
Right.
probes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
bet.
There's a
Actually,
sim idea.
you know what?
Oh
yeah.
man.
That sounds pretty
Mm,
barbaric, but I do think that would be effective. Let's be honest.
yeah.
That immediate feedback of like a little zap, a little woo, haha.
Sort of the Pavlov's dog approach to coaching.
Yeah, the moment you miss
Yeah.
that apex, meh.
Yeah, yeah.
So, do you have any advice for a driver who feels like they're hitting those plateaus? Because the plateaus, the faster you get, especially, or the closer to your goals you get. Let's say, which is probably to win. I'm gonna guess most of us want to win. Is they get fewer and further between, and they get longer and longer, and then the growth gets smaller and smaller. Do you have any advice, or what's your go-to advice, maybe for a driver that's in that position, or for someone who's more in the coaching role and they see the driver in that position to is there a light switch that you could flick them out of it, or is it like you have to explain to them that we're on one of those long plateaus? I haven't found the answer for this, so I'm curious.
Uh, Okay, so at some point I got to answer with it depends. It depends
Sure.
on the driver. So that's the first thing, and uh, I like the way you talked about the plateau and how it often, the closer you get to the top, sometimes the longer that plateau. But I think you nailed it in that it's just the conversation that, hey, it's part of the natural human process. Nobody learns on a learning curve, right? Is there are steps, which means there are plateaus, and it's going to happen. Uh, One of the things that I like to do when somebody is on a plateau is first off, I like to ask a lot of what I call right questions, like, what are you doing right? What's working?
Mm,
And
Oh,
I like that.
because lot of times somebody will get there and they're frustrated, and what are they focused on? They're focusing on all the things that's not working. And so sometimes just like, what is working? What are you doing right? Uh, so having that conversation, having the conversation about that's the natural part of it, and then looking for things that will give them a quick win. And yeah, again, it depends on where the driver's at and what level and experience and all that kind of stuff. But there may be a time in there where you just need to find something that's almost so simple, and you give them the task of go do this, and they do it, and then all of a sudden they're feeling like, oh, I see some progress now. So help them find some progress, help them see some progress with some quick wins. Uh,
I think that's
so
part of the
that
allure of, like, pointing out, like, "Oh, you're early apexing here," or, "Oh, you're not able to commit the throttle here," or whatever. Like, that's the allure of, like, pointing out that stuff rather than going into the fundamental issues of why that's an issue to begin with, because you want them to see that progress, and like fixing those fundamentals is a much longer process, and you kind of have to get their buy-in for them to like fully believe in fixing these fundamental things, because seeing the progress of that stuff is going to be slower than just like spoon feeding them the actual fixes.
yeah. Somebody asked me not too long ago about coaching and kind of what's the most important thing. It's they need to want it.
Yeah.
And uh, I've never met a driver who cannot improve unless they don't want to, unless they're not willing to learn. And I think probably every coach has come across somebody who says, "Yeah, I want to coach. I want to get better." And then you start digging in and you're going, "Actually, I'm not sure you really do." I've worked with some drivers who want to brag about having a coach, but they don't actually want to
mm.
learn from that coach.
What does it
And
look like when they don't want to learn? Because like
uh,
I'm curious like how you would spot that out.
uh, uh, fairly simple in that everything you ask them to do, they don't do it. And then, oftentimes you'll suggest something and they'll go, "I know that doesn't work for me. I'll just do it my way." And like,
Yeah.
Uh,
and you see that too often, and eventually you go, "Actually, you're not willing to accept it. Your mind is not open." And now I've had drivers where they're like that, and I'm a sucker for challenges, and I just look at it and go, "Okay, I'm gonna find a way in," because there's always
yeah,
a way in. And, you keep chipping away at it, and if you can find some little win for them, you suggest something, do something, you work with them on this, whatever, and all of a sudden they see that and they go, "Oh, okay, I want a little bit more of that, and then I want a little bit more of that." And I've had drivers who, yeah, I mean, it's close to the point where you're going, "This just isn't working," and then you chip away at it, and eventually they turn into, you know, good, open-minded people with some challenges, but they open up eventually.
Yeah,
You just gotta find a way in.
you have to way to like win their belief in the process
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Uh, uh, that's what makes this so interesting, and I don't know, like, we're having this conversation and it seems, very much focused on coaching, but all of this applies to somebody, who you're the driver, you're the sponsor, you're the car engineer, you're the coach, you're the team manager. You're all one person. You're wearing all those different hats.
yeah,
And uh, I I would say for a driver in that situation, all of these things apply. Like sometimes as a driver, you may feel like I'm struggling. I'm struggling. What am I going to, what do I want to work on next? Or, man, I suck at this and I'm terrible at this. And, I gotta, I gotta get better at that. And you get frustrated, and then it's like, okay, just simplify it, narrow it down, just pick one thing. And by the way, pick something, just one thing that you're pretty darn sure that you can go and fix that one thing. Could be really simple. And fix that one thing and then work on the next one thing and then the next one thing and make them really simple. You know, the whole thing of, you know, somebody's got a goal. I want to be Formula One world champion. Well, that's a big, huge
Yeah.
goal. Um, how are you going to get there? Well, a billion little tiny little things, right? So find some of those little things and get a few wins, and it, you will. It's the motivation to want to keep opening up and doing even more. Then, so all of these things apply whether you're coaching yourself or you're coaching someone else.
Yeah, for sure. How often do you find that you have to tell someone to use I'm trying to figure out the best way to ask this quickly, but to either do more events or drive more or put in more time or because I ask because a lot of our circles are grassroots drivers or sim drivers, and some of the biggest limiting factors can be the number of events they can take the time to do or the amount of time they're willing to like sit in the sim rig and actually put in the work. And DJ is one of the first people, the first person I ever heard really assign homework. Do you ever like I'd never thought of that. I was trying to do sim coaching and I'd never thought to tell someone like I need to see on your data in the in the software that you've done 100 laps since the last time we talked. I'd never thought of that, and he does that. So I know you work with a lot of drivers who like that maybe the time is a limiting factor, maybe the money's not as much as some of the listeners, but how often does that come in and do you have to just be like, you just got to go do more? Like, let's stop talking and go do more.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting because I think I could answer that a couple of different ways. One is sometimes I've had drivers who, especially because a sim is so accessible, easy to use sometimes, it's almost like they're practicing too much because they're practicing the wrong thing. So simply more seat time isn't necessarily going to fix things. It's
Sure.
what's the quality of that, right? So now, if you can get somebody who's doing because of the homework and you're assigning and you're able to track all that kind of stuff, then absolutely. I mean, that's super important. And you know, I've worked with a driver who um, I've- we spend just a ton of time on the sim, but in the beginning, every time he was on the sim, I was with him essentially remotely, which is the cool thing about sim coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but over time, it's gotten to the point where I can just go, hey, I want you to do this for X number of laps or X amount of time or whatever. Um, then, you know, then I want you to do this and then I want you to do this. And yeah, you know, I can hop in, I can look at the data, I can, you know, I need that stuff. And then over time, it's almost like, again, you build the relationship and the trust and it's going, I know this driver is doing that. Um, you know, I've had drivers, well, current driver who, uh, it would be like I would be up at 5 o'clock because that's when we do most of the sim stuff. We'd be up at 5 o'clock in the morning and spend 2 to 3 hours, um, 6, 7 days a week. And
Wow.
then there'd be like a day off or a week off, and you know, be one of the rare weekends I was at home, and it's Sunday morning, and it's 7 o'clock, and I look at my phone, and my wife goes, "How many?" I go, "Oh, six text messages saying, what do you want me to do now? Been through all the stuff you assigned me." So now I'm going to say that's a rare, relatively rare. Uh,
Is that person's like pace of development just like super rapid? Because I would
yes,
imagine with that, yeah, I would imagine with that amount of buy-in, like there's no way that person's not just like
yeah,
the gains are piling up.
absolutely. I mean, some of the biggest gains, the quickest learning that I've ever seen, and for many reasons. But at the, if I had to pick just one reason, it's the work ethic, which
Yeah.
goes back to what you talked about in the very beginning. DJ is the talent versus effort and that whole thing. And um, so, yes. And now I've worked with other drivers who say, look, I can afford to put this amount of time in. Well, then that's my job. Then how do I make that amount of time more efficient? And uh, to have somebody who says, yeah, I can be on a sim 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, just tell me what to do. That's almost easy. It's somebody else that says, look, because of work, family life, whatever else, I can spend 3 days, I can spend 1 hour for 3 days in a week. Okay, what's the best way to use that with a sim? Um, and it's no different than I have I have and still do work with some grassroots drivers who they got a job. They have no budget or barely any budget, and really my job as a coach, I think, is at that point is how do I maximize every moment? Because yeah, it'd be wonderful just to say, hey, need you to go and run 15 races this year because you need more practice in traffic. Okay, sorry, can't afford that. I got the budget to do 5 races. Well, okay, you could do 5 of these races, or you could do 5 of these races. I'm going to go where pick a budget endurance series these days. My driver that races in LMP2 on off weekends, guess what he's doing? He's racing in a WRL, AER, Lucky Dog race, Champ Car race, just
Sure.
simply and you know what? He will pass and be passed more in one day, in one race, than he will
Yeah.
in 2 seasons of racing in IMSA. So, it's just really great. So, despite him driving an LMP2 car in IMSA, I say, really, you should be doing more of these races because you're just that's gonna maximize how much you learn in a different way, in a different area. So, another
That
long rambling answer to your simple question,
no,
Tom.
that is what we're here for. All right,
No,
this actually ties
that's
in
what we
perfectly.
signed up
This is
for.
one of our yeah, this is one of our listener questions that's actually been in the backlog for since we started teasing that you were going to be on probably 3 years ago, even though we've only been doing this for two. Um,
Wow,
all right. It says,
impressive.
says uh, how much and what kind of information should someone provide a new coach before their first session? I'm assuming that means session working together, not session on track. Anything we should definitely do or shouldn't bother trying to provide some context. I am a habitual aggressive overthinker and overanalyzer. I think about sending DJ an email asking for coaching and writing up a full thesis on my goals everywhere I think I have low hanging fruit. Uh, then start talking about where I grew up and then my mother's maiden name and then my social security. And I realize, oh, this is too much info. So where's the line and where is the best place to start, if anything?
Who
Well,
who
I would say if that person was talking to me, I'd say the very first thing is send me your bank account and your password because I need that to really get going here. So
really to
no,
really dig into
Right.
the fundamental level, I'm gonna need the wire transfer
yeah,
information.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, and in fact, I think whoever it was that asked the question, the first thing would be simply, uh, how do you think? Because what I would love to know first time if I'm working with a driver is how do you think? How do you learn? And often I will ask questions in the very beginning. I'll say, what do you do well? What could you get better at? And by the way, the number of times I'll say one of the questions is, what do you do well now? And they'll go, well, I'm not very good at racecraft. And I go, no, what do you do well? Well,
Yeah.
I'm not very fast. It takes me a long time to get up. No, what do you do well? Uh,
This is an
but
important
that's
question.
also it's also an insight into how they think, right?
Yeah.
They think about so the fact that somebody can identify that they're very analytical, that's super helpful. Sometimes analytical people are fantastic to work with because you show them some squiggly lines and you say, go do this with your feet or your hands. And that's really great. Sometimes they can get so caught up in that I then say, drive stupid, turn your brain off and just start driving. And we got to work at that. Um, so the very first thing, if somebody says, what information should you give a coach is help the coach understand how you learn and how you think. And don't be afraid to say, this is what I want from a coach. I want a coach who is going to hold me accountable, who's going to like send me a text message at 10 o'clock every night and say, remember, tomorrow morning you got to do whatever. uh, or hey, I want somebody who's going to help, you know, be somebody I can ask questions of, or somebody who I can, you know, lean my head on their shoulder and tell them about all my problems I have in my life. You know, like
That have
the
nothing to
more
do
that
with racing.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But the more of that you know as a coach going into it, the quicker both of you are gonna accomplish stuff. So um, don't be afraid to tell your coach what it is, how you think, what you're looking for, and but tell them what you do well as because you're everybody loves to tell people what they suck at,
I
but
d
it's
I
important.
I absolutely love that. Like, asking them, "Okay, so what are you doing well at this moment?" is like, yeah, that's huge. I don't think I've ever asked anybody. I always ask like, "Oh, where do you think you're leaving the time?" And then like have that conversation. And then like that's like a view into their psyche as well, as like how they explain how they're losing time here or there, and then we actually go to the data and see if like their butt dyno is accurate and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm mixing in the like, what do you think you're doing really well, like, or like even if we're working on a specific track, I'm gonna start mixing in like, what section of the track do you think you got? Like, which section is nailed and why? And yeah, I think that's gonna add a whole nother level of really understanding where these like fundamental issues are.
And sometimes you'll ask that question, and they'll go, "Man, you know, I'm turn 6, I'm nailing that corner." And you're looking at the data or the video or something, you're going,
Uh-oh.
"Actually, that's not right."
Uh-oh.
So, then my response would be, "Why do you feel like that? What makes you think that 6 is working well for you?"
Yeah.
And then, "Okay, you're doing great then with if you feel like you're doing 6, but what could you do better with 6 then?" And just, keep chipping
Yeah.
away at that, and,
I like that.
um, uh,
You're like
yeah,
you're
the
like
more
you're leading them into critically thinking in a way that they can do without you at some point in the future. Like, you're teaching them how to like ask those like, and I've heard this where somebody will say like, "Oh, I heard you asking about the report card after that corner," because that's a thing that I talk about, is like we need a report card after each corner, like what went well, what didn't go well, like what can I change, like after each corner, preferably when you're like actively doing the lap, but I know that bandwidth is a little bit of a issue. So even if you can watch the lap later and then still do that report card, like that's like second best.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, just yeah, this is super enlightening. I'm so glad you're here, Ross.
yeah,
Yeah.
so am I. The this is fun, and, uh, I at some point, I just gotta turn around and ask you guys questions though, so
Well,
because
there you go.
I learn more by asking questions than I do, than by talking, right?
Sure.
Um,
Yeah,
so,
that makes sense. Do you have a
yeah.
question? Do you wonder
Uh,
how we ended up on the silly podcast name Lizard Brains?
so that was the first question is, where did the name come from? Because it's awesome.
Every other episode is actually a conspiracy theory about different things, like where the lizard people live in the mountains and
Uh-huh.
whether the moon is flat or
The
whatever they
Sasquatch.
say.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I'll let DJ explain. He picked it, and
Yeah,
it was too perfect.
I've been talking about like appeasing the lizard brain for a while, and it's like you're just chasing that dopamine, and that dopamine is like
Yeah.
your name at the top of the list, or the lap timer is green or whatever, and like the part of our brain that is chasing those little dopamine hits is like our lizard brain, quote unquote. So that's part of the reason why the name of the podcast is Lizard Brains, because me and Tom were both like suckers for those like tiny dopamine hits that like keep us
Yeah.
like chasing the lap time, or trying to get the green, or trying to see your name at the top of the list, or whatever it is. It's like those little dopamine hits is the kind of the thing that like drives us to like keep going, essentially.
So what do you and from both of you, I don't care who goes first. What do you do well as a coach? Like, what's your strength as a coach?
Uh,
I got mine. You want me to go?
yeah, you can go. I'll go next.
I think my biggest strength is actually mostly my empathy and my ability to put myself in that person's head and do way more of the stuff you were talking about. And I wish I was more actively prepared for this to be part of why I was coaching, really, because I thought partially like I got dropped by Honda. Now I don't have a job. I need to start coaching and make some more money, or replace the money I lost. But also, I really thought of it in that smaller minded way of it being like I'm going to go help somebody by showing them how fast their car can go. That's literally I mostly started coaching by doing data laps in people's cars with them in the passenger seat at grid life events or SCCA events and stuff, and they would just let me drive their car for a session. I have the skill set built that I can do a lap or two and then show them at least something. Not faster every single time, but I was able to at least start that dialogue that way. But if I'd have been more conscious of the idea of it being a mental coach and a companion and tapping into that, I think I would have been a little bit more successful more quickly, or at least figured that out faster, I guess. Um, you smiled. I don't know if
That
that's like
well, no, it's when I asked the question and you started, I was like, empathy. I just,
You just knew that that
Tom,
was Tom's?
you and I don't know each other super well, but we've sort of had little conversations here and there through the years. And I know that you can drive. Uh, and I've heard you talking to other drivers, and I think you have a that doesn't surprise me that that's a strength of yours is that you can identify, you can relate to them, you can understand. And it was interesting what you said earlier about need things to be simple as well. That's what
yeah.
makes a great coach, I think. So that's really cool. DJ,
I think I would like to think that when I'm coaching somebody, they're having fun. Like it's like the time spent with me is a good time, and I would like to think that it makes the next little bit of practice that they're doing or the thing that they're working on or whatever a little bit more fun than it would be otherwise. So that's what I hope, because my thought is if the more fun it is, then the more they get out of it, and that would probably be the thing that I'm best at is making sure that people are having a good time, and that opens them up to more learning.
how do you do that? Like, are you cracking jokes? Are
Yeah, I'm
you,
making jokes. I'm being
hey,
a
let me show you
goof.
this Instagram post that I just
No,
saw?
no, no. I'm like memeing and like kind of making a little bit of fool of myself sometimes. And I mean, it just like it's literally just like this on the podcast where like something will happen and I'll like make like a joke about it or something, or make light of something, or somebody will crash in the sim or whatever, and I'm like, good thing we got a reset button, or just like little things like that, and just like keeping it light, and goes on, and noticing when people are getting frustrated and not letting them like dig into a hole, and being like, you know what, I think we have enough to work on for like the next week or whatever. Like, why don't we just call it quits here? Like, why don't you go take a break and then come back a little bit later? Like, because I know like some of the people I work with, like even if I'm like, all right, we're gonna call it quits there, and then they'll stay on the sim rig and like drive their own brain into oblivion, like with frustration. And so like I try to like separate themselves from that so they can come back in like a different headspace and like try to work on the thing that is difficult to work on.
That's really
Yeah.
interesting. And I remember a few years ago reading an article about gamers, how because sometimes you can get on a sim or playing a game and you could be there all day long.
Hell yeah.
And they've done well. There's always that they've done research. Who's they, right? But anyways,
Yeah.
there has been research done, and I don't know who did this research, but more than once this research has been done around gamers primarily, and in terms of what's the ideal length of time. And it's actually quite short. It's like the best thing is to have a short break every 20 minutes.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
you know, I've been on a sim with somebody for 2 hours straight, and you're like, we sure would have been better off taking a bunch of short little breaks. And I've actually read this thing fairly recently where 20 minutes, if you take 20 minutes and, very focused, and then you take a 5 to 10 minute break where you don't necessarily have to think about anything, but you kind of almost just let what you just learned just to kind of sink in a little bit more. And then you do another 20 minutes and then another 5 or 10 minutes off and then 20 minutes. And I think this thing said it was like, when you get to 90 minutes, even if you've done sort of the 20 with breaks and everything, getting beyond 90 minutes at a time isn't really helping a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Now, if you're on a sim, doesn't you don't have to pay for your fuel, so you can just kind of keep on going. Uh, and there comes a point in time where it's like, I'm going to drive beyond 90 minutes because I'm having fun,
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're not having so much fun that you're actually undoing the learning that you've done.
Yeah, I try to like actively pay attention to the fun that's being had, because then when it gets frustrating, then I know that the like I'm not gonna come through. Like anything I'm trying to like talk about or whatever, like it's just not gonna hit. So I like try to actively keep uh like tabs on the fun that's being had. And that most of the time dictates the length of the session. I'll have some drivers that like every time we meet, it's an hour and a half because we're having a blast the whole time. And then they start to get frustrated, or they like their concentration peters out after, a half hour. And then that's fine. Like this is the time that we have to work with. You can't go much farther into that because they're not paying me to make them frustrated. They're paying me to help them get better at the thing.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be cool if we get paid to make people
Oh
frustrated?
my
Because
god,
that
I
I could
might
specialize in.
yeah, that might be my calling.
Yeah.
That well, first I want to agree with DJ. I think like this infectious positivity is your superpower, and that's why. And then you're an expert at pointing that positivity like at improvement. And I don't know how you do that all the time. I'm way too emotional and empathetic sometimes that I can't be that for
You,
somebody,
you talking about me
or
or Ross?
I'm talking about you. I don't know
Okay.
Ross well enough yet. Ross, what's your best quality for coaching?
Yeah, yeah.
Flip it back at you, and then I have another comment, but then
Uh,
we'll across.
I First of all, it has changed because I've been doing this for so long. I I think I think it would be that, I don't give up on anybody. I've heard coaches kinda go, "Yeah," the old OSB, other sport beckons thing,
Sure.
that person's just never ever gonna get it. There's not a person in the world who cannot improve, and that's my job as a coach is to help improve. I can't guarantee I can turn everybody into a Formula 1 world champion. In fact, I know that for a fact that I can't, but I can help people enjoy what they're doing and improve. So, um, and I guess I've learned through the years of uh, different ways of doing that with different people. And
Yeah.
the advantage of doing this for many many years is you work with a lot of different drivers and you go, oh man, if only I'd known that when I worked with that driver 10
Mm,
years ago, man, that would have been great.
yeah.
So always
Yeah.
learning. Yeah.
Uh,
That begs the question, have you coached a Formula 1 driver?
I have not coached a Formula One driver.
yet,
I have
Yet.
yet,
There you
yet.
go.
yet. Actually, great. I love that word yet. Uh, I've coached a driver who did do a tiny bit of Formula One, Alexander Rossi, who did good,
He was okay.
turned out to be doing okay in IndyCar.
Getting okay.
Um, uh, the and I can't say that I've spent a bunch of time with him, but the when he came out of karting, the very first thing he did was went through a 3-day driver development camp that I put on, and when he was 14. Um, so yeah, I've haven't worked with. It would be cool. I had a fellow a few years ago now. I guess it's probably about 3 or 4 years ago, who contacted me and said, "I'm trying to get a hold of uh, Sergio Perez's management team because I want them to hire you to coach him." And you start having these little
Oh.
daydreams about that, and you're going, "Well, if I was to coach Perez as Verstappen's teammate, what would I do? How would I approach that?" And I spent a lot of time thinking about it, which was a great mental exercise. There was also times where I'm kind of like, would I really want to fly over the world, all over the world, 24 races and all that. Would I want that stress of that travels part of it? I don't know if I would at this point in my life.
Yeah.
I would have said yes, of course, but
I wonder,
uh,
do Formula One drivers have driver coaches? Because I feel like I like you never see any of them or hear about it or anything like that. But I feel like they would be at such a disadvantage if they didn't have another brain critically thinking about their own driving.
so I'm going to say every one of them has. Depends on how you define coach, because sometimes their performance engineer works as a kind of as a coach.
Yeah,
Uh, Sometimes their fitness trainer slash dietitian slash
like performance
personal. Yeah,
psychologists. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
you
That makes
know.
sense.
So they have all these different resources, and so I know, I've read a lot and seen some or listened to some podcasts with Daniel Ricciardo, where he talked about the guy that was his fitness trainer slash personal assistant slash personal therapist kind of person.
Second
Um,
brain.
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, like a
Okay.
lizard. Sorry.
Yeah.
Um,
They have 2 brains, right?
Wait,
yeah,
they do.
yeah. So I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say, I would be. I don't know of a single Formula One driver who does not have somebody that's playing some role in there. Now, how many coaches of and by the way, a lot of Formula One drivers end up going and working with Rob Wilson on driving technique stuff. Rob Wilson's a guy in the UK. Um, I've had him on my podcast. We've known each other for many, many years, and um, he's done some stuff where he'll take a Formula One driver and he takes them out just in a UK a saloon car on a airport runway, and they work on some basic stuff around balance and things like that. So he works with some drivers around driving technique kind of stuff and gets them to go back and focus on some real basic stuff. And so I know a lot of Formula One drivers who have worked with Rob. Um, but yeah, so there's all sorts of things. And, IndyCar drivers are kind of the same. Some, I know many of the guys who are spotters in IndyCar are they're coaches, and one of their jobs on IndyCar weekends is they spot for them as well. But really, after the session, they're sitting down and going through data with them and asking questions around, what about your brakes here? What about the turn in here? That kind of stuff. So um, it's yeah, the word driver coach sometimes is not used, and there's still that stigma in our sport where it's like you have to have a coach. What's wrong with you?
What if we
Yeah.
rebranded driver coaching with like something a little bit more advertisable? Like what would you call it? Instead of driver
Driving
Great, I
God?
like
coach?
that.
How about driving God? Yeah.
Ooh, I like that.
Of
Guru.
course Tom likes that. Tom like, "Oh, can you hire me as your driving god?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Like what
I
if you were just like just hired best friend?
right. Well, helmet carrier has been
Yep,
used
that works
before.
too. Yep.
Yeah. And it's a little bit like, and it's interesting, Lewis Hamilton has talked about this, about therapists, and I got to say, more and more athletes, professional athletes, have admitted to having mental challenges that they need a therapist for. But for some reason, therapists have been seen as, you need a therapist? You have a weakness. And coaches are also kind of seen that way, at least in motorsport. Other sports, you know, I don't know, hasn't, not like that.
I'd
Yeah.
like to think that the therapist stigma is changing over time though.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
you're a
got it.
driving
You guys ready for
therapist. Yeah, what is it,
No,
Tom?
I got it. We're gonna make our money here, so, be ready
Okay.
to trademark it. Driver concierge.
Oh,
And
Ooh,
then
I
you have
like
to
that.
you dress the nice little uniform, you
Ooh.
get to charge Yeah.
You got like
I
Maybe
a
just
a
bought
maybe a
driverconcierge.com, so
what
I
if
got
your
it.
driver coach just had a suit on and you're like sitting at the laptop looking at squiggly lines, but like your driver coach has a suit? Is that better?
Yeah,
Like not a
like
driver suit.
butler almost.
Yeah, I'm talking like
Yeah.
you got the tie on.
Yeah. Ah, I'm out
We have
then.
one other good question from one of our listeners. The first question was from David Zeman, by the way, and then the
Uh,
second question is from default user. But they're with us now, so maybe they can tell us who that is. But it is the first part. What does eyes up actually mean? I see Formula One
Oh,
driver eye trackers look at the apex as they enter the corner, which goes against the idea of keeping your eyes up track. Also, then when I exit a corner, how far ahead should I really look? I know it depends, but is eyes up generally 3 to 5 car lengths? Should I be looking at my next brake marker?
thi-
Question mark. And then
this
he's got a
is.
second
Can I
second
guess what the
question.
answer is going to be? It depends.
I was gonna start by saying, how much time do we have? Because this is a really cool topic, and I could say 37.6 feet, and we'd be done.
Oh,
Or I could really get into this thing and talk about vision, and because I spent 2 years, uh, r- no pun intended, really focused on learning how top athletes and top drivers use their vision. And one of the things, anybody listening to this, one of the things you should do is you should go and do a YouTube search for Nico Hulkenberg
I've seen this.
eye tracking device. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah.
And basically, he was wearing an eye tracking device while driving a Formula One car. And the first time I watched it, I went, wow, he doesn't look as far ahead as I thought he did or should. And so the whole idea of eyes up, well, he's not looking that far ahead. And then the more I watched it, the more I realized he actually does he glances ahead far and then comes back and looks a little bit closer and then really far ahead. And these quick glances are flicks of the eyes going ahead. And then I read a ton of different research around athletes in other sports. There's a whole thing in a lot of other sports called quiet eye, where your eyes, um, the whole, if you're playing golf or tennis or something, keep your eye on the ball kind of thing. The eye kind of slows down at that moment of impact. And so there's a bunch of stuff there. There's been a bunch of research where they used eye tracking devices to track good road drivers, motorists. And uh, there's all sorts of interesting stuff that comes out of that applies to driving on the track as well. So I spent some time and kind of figured out what I call the vision process. And basically, when you're driving along, your eyes, first of all, you come to a corner. How many corners do we drive through that we can't physically see through? Many of them, right?
Yeah.
You can't see the exit of the corner before you get to it, right? And but mentally you can. The wonderful thing about road courses is we drive around and around and around and around and around and around.
Yeah.
And before we even get to the corner, we have a memory of where the exit of the corner is. We have a mental, so I just call it mental vision. We use our mental vision. Different if you're a rally driver and you're seeing a corner for kind of the first time. Well, for the first time at speed, anyways. Um, but we have this mental vision of where we're going. Our eyes then flick ahead as far as they can physically see. So if somebody says, "How far ahead should I look?" Practically, and there are exceptions to this, but practically, as far as your eyes can physically see, look up ahead. Just flick up there and go, "That's where I'm heading. That's giving me a target, and everything's clear. That's where I'm heading." Then your eyes sort of come back and they scan backwards to the next main reference point. And that could be a begin of braking, it could be a turning point, could be sort of apex into the corner. And then your eyes are a little closer then at that point. And then your eyes quickly flick ahead again, and then they come back to this focus on the reference. And then they glance ahead, and then they come back. And the best drivers, and if you watch this Hulkenberg video, you can actually see his eyes kind of flick ahead and then come back and look at a reference, then flick ahead and then come back and look. And on average, you spend about twice as long on the reference, the focus part, as you do on that quick glance ahead. And then peripherally, you're checking how are you doing. So that's the vision process, 4 steps: mental vision, glance or flick ahead, scanning back to the focal point or the focus on the next reference, and then you're checking with your peripheral vision. So when somebody says, what does eyes up, look ahead mean? First off, it means your eyes need to be moving. I've seen drivers, I've talked to drivers, and I've learned what they're doing when they're not doing it right. And they've been told, look far ahead. So they look far ahead, but their eyes are kind of, that focal point is kind of static. It's like
Yeah.
just stuck out there.
Yeah.
And their eyes need to be moving. It needs to be looking ahead and then coming back and then looking ahead and then coming back. So there's all of those things that's going on. And so, Mr. Default, I hope I've answered sort of the how far ahead is. It does depend. But if your eyes are going from that glancing or flicking as far as you physically can see, and then back to the next reference point, and your eyes are scanning, that's the best way to answer that. I'm gonna sorry, but I got to talk about this part of it is, and this is something that as I was kind of getting this research done, I was talking with Dr. David Ferguson, who runs the Spartan Lab at University of Michigan, where he does a lot of testing of drivers in a variety of different things, nutrition and sweat and all sorts of stuff. And he has a lab there, and he has a simulator, and he's had drivers of every kind of level and type that you can imagine there. And we were talking about vision, and in the conversation, I'm explaining this. He goes, that explains why what he's seeing, because he's had eye tracking device on drivers in a simulator. And he says, first of all, he asked me, he says, do you know that the uh, in the general population in the world, about 9 to 10% are dyslexic. 9 to 10% or 8 to 10% of the general population have some amount of dyslexia, meaning you kind of see things and scrambled and sometimes backwards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he says, do you know that in professional motorsport, it's over 30%? And
Wow.
Interesting. I
and yet,
wonder what part of dyslexia makes your eyes more proficient at taking in information.
well, that's what we're going to get to here. This is really interesting. And he goes, but you kind of go, well, what about other professional sports? Basketball, hockey, football, whatever else, tennis, golf. It's about 8 to 10%, same as the general population. Here's the thing.
Wow.
He noticed that the best drivers with an eye tracking device using a simulator, as they approach a corner, their eyes kind of go, it's like they go to the right side of the page, meaning they go and look for the exit of the corner, and then they work their way back to where they're going to next.
Yeah.
And yet, what most drivers do is they drive the track sequentially. They come up and go, I begin braking here, then I look for the turn-in point, then I look for the apex, then I look for the exit. The best drivers approach a corner and go, there's the exit of the corner, and they work their way back to the beginning. And he said that's what he's noticed in the lab with drivers with using eye tracking on a simulator. And I've actually, in the past bunch of years, been working at training drivers to do more of that. And the sim is a wonderful place to practice that because, well, it's difficult because obviously, depending on your monitors, and or VR or whatever you're using, there are certain limitations. But the practice of the act of looking for the exit and working your way back, thinking about that it's a great way to picture how you're doing it and then practice that.
That's wild.
Yeah, that's wow, that's blowing my mind a little bit. So I'm dyslexic and not so diagnosed that I needed special classes and stuff,
It
but
all makes sense.
it happens in my brain a lot. And I when I read a paragraph, my eyes can't help but flick to the end. And then I realize I don't know what happened to get me there, so I have to reread. It's like that's a fascinating correlation between
To-
visual
So
technique
Tom,
and
do you?
see, you're naturally talented.
that. No,
Oh,
no,
geez, the
To the
whole
beginning.
naturally scrambled.
the whole
Oh god.
Yeah,
podcast is
well,
over.
yeah.
Tom, do you ever find yourself looking at the exit of the corner like bef before the rest of the steps of the corner are taking place?
Yeah, all the time. I
This
don't know
you know
why.
how much subconscious like writing I'm gonna have to try to
Yeah.
overwrite to look at the exit first? This has never came up before.
I mean, it has. We've never verbalized. I'm gonna timestamp this and use that because that was such a good explanation of all of it. And I've tried. I think a lot of us have tried to describe that before. But something that we've talked about on kind of our own way that we work together is DJ's noticed that I use time on an autocross course differently, like downtime, and he calls it Tom time. It's like, oh, there's this little time where you're not doing anything as a driver, even though there might be a lot happening in an autocross course. It's just a small acceleration zone or whatever. I never thought much of it, but I was verbalizing it to somebody else, and he's like, I need to do more of that. And I think that this all
Ah.
correlates too, because it's essentially using the time that you have to take your attention off where you are to look essentially to the furthest point ahead of where you need to figure out where you're going. Especially if there's, I find if it's more than a 90-degree direction change, really helpful. 180-degree direction change, you need to have figured that out, much before you get there. Versus a 20-degree direction change is pretty easy to fudge.
The
I don't
biggest
know, like all
takeaway,
these things are clicking. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Tom, the biggest takeaway from like Tom time in quotations was like on your course walk, figuring out like, oh, this is where Tom time is going to take place. Like you recognize the
Sure.
spots. So like when you, because autocross, you only get those 3 runs, and then like, yeah, competition's over. So like recognizing on the course walk when Tom time can happen is like super crucial to like get that spatial information of like how everything's laid out together. So like that was like the thing that like biggest click for me, but I never thought about it as looking at the exit and like carving back. It's more of just getting like a spatial awareness of how everything's laid out.
And it's sort of the, if you don't know where you're going, how you gonna get there, right? And that's the
Yeah.
whole idea. So it's a visual thing, but it's also a mental thing. It's Tom, I'm gonna guess here that you you not just, even if you can't physically see that end of the corner, mentally that's where you are, and then you kind of think back. I, I remember reading years ago. It was a quote from Jack Nicklaus, the great golfer from previous century, right? Um, he said that he never hit a shot in golf without, before he hit it, he would look to where he wanted the ball to land. And then in his mind, he imagined the ball coming back to him and to the point where it's sitting in front of him. So he pictured it from the end coming back. And then it was like, how do I get the ball to go there? Well, I swing the club this way. I'm going, that's kind of the same thing. And I think that's what the best
Yeah.
drivers do is they know that's the X of the corner. How do I get there? And one of the things I've been doing a lot more of recently is I've had drivers who, let's say they're struggling with a particular corner. And the one where I first started doing this was turn one at Sebring. And Tom, it's turn one at Sebring, super fast, and you can't see the exit of the corner because there's a concrete wall on the inside.
Can't
But
even
if
see
you
the
take a
apex.
video, sorry,
You can't even see the apex.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
and but if you take a video and you slow motion it from the turn in point all the way around the corner to the X of the point and stop somewhere past the apex and go, now I can physically see the exit. Keep winding the video up to that exit point and then stop there and go, that's the exit. Okay. Now rewind step by step the video and you rewind it back all the way to the beginning of the turn and you get, so you're sitting there at the beginning of the corner at the turn in point and going, I can see the exit.
Yeah.
And you do that enough times with the video, and it just helps you when you approach it at speed and go, I know where the exit is now.
I'm gonna
Whereas
look
before it was like turn in and go, there, oh, there it is.
Yeah. That's a great tip. I like that a lot.
I'm gonna look like such a lunatic at my next autocross event when I start at the end and walk the course backwards.
Well, have you done that on a track walk where
Walk
you,
backwards? I don't think
well,
my
you
calves can handle it,
walk through a
Ross.
corner, walk the corner, get to the exit point, turn around, and look back.
Absolutely, yes. I do that a lot, and every time I look back, I wonder why I'm doing that, but I know in, like, my heart of hearts that it's helping me.
Yeah, yeah. It's so cool, this stuff, like, and, it's so part of it is the physical visibility, vision part of it, but it's also the mental vision part of it as well. That's yeah,
Wow, I need to do
cool.
more research on this because it's very interesting. Default user, aka Mike, who's also Patreon on the Patreon subscriber on your "It's Not the Car" podcast. So
Oh,
I think he
hey,
must have
Mike.
gotten some tip off on these questions or something.
Ah,
But
cool.
the second question he had unrelated was, which driver do you choose for your lucky dog team? Driver A, one that knows the feel of every car on the limit, but has but not perfect technique, or B, a driver with perfect inputs but has only ever driven Miatas. He said Miatas, not me.
So what are we racing in Lucky Dog? Are we racing a Miata?
Oh, I just assumed you have a lucky dog car. Do you not?
Mm. Uh,
He asked it
no.
confidently. Oh, okay.
I don't have one. I've done a couple of Lucky
Let's
Dog
say
races and been so, okay. Uh,
let's say a driver that knows the feel of every car on the limit, but not perfect technique, or a driver with perfect inputs but very small experience in anything, and you're putting him in something completely different.
hmm, I the obvious answer is the first one. The first driver who has just got the ability to drive most anything near its limits or at its limits, right? They're gonna probably be more adaptable. Uh, so much of it though is also then what what's their racecraft like? Uh, and as you know, in that kind of racing, it has more to do with your racecraft than how fast you are. Um,
Sure.
um,
Yeah, I'm
I
with
don't know. Interesting question. I'm gonna be thinking about that one tonight. I think too, because I'm not sure. Like I kind of go, well, I think that's to me. At first, it's obvious that you go with the driver who's can drive pretty much anything because they're probably going to adapt to the situations better than a driver who's really, really, really good in one car, but just doesn't have that experience of applying that to other cars. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. Yeah.
I think it depends on the car that they get put in, right? Because
Yeah.
if all their experience is in a car that's like a car ass car, and then they get thrown in something that's a little weird, like for example, like if all they've driven is a Miata, which has like a good nose on entry and whatever, and then they jump into a BMW, which like you kind of need a carve on exit, then like that might be a tough learning curve to figure out in a like a high stress situation. Like, hey, you just like got driver swapped into the thing and like go out there and go do lap times. By the way, we're trying to win, right? Like that would be like that. I don't know. I to me, I would take the driver that does all the things.
And I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to go. I'd take the driver who's going to be the most fun.
Mm.
Yeah, I thought of that too. I was thinking the first thing is the one that I want to hang out with off track, but that's a bad
Exactly. Yeah. 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 Because
that's a bad
I
answer, kind of though.
yeah, I mean, I think
Maybe it's not.
anybody that's done a race and, you know, you could have somebody who's just absolutely brilliantly fast and good and everything, but they're less than fun to be around for the rest of the weekend. Yeah. If it might be different if we were going to go and race in IMSA and we were going to get paid based on our results. I
Yeah.
might put up with more of that with somebody else.
The
Yeah.
only one that the only one that trumps that is the driver that may not be all that fun versus the driver that's super fun, but that guy crashes a lot. I don't really want
Yeah.
him on my team
Yeah.
either.
Yeah. 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 Because
Um,
then it's no fun. Yeah.
right, yeah. Then I don't get to
Yeah.
have my fun.
Yeah.
Do you have time for 2 fun ones at the end?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
TJ, do you have
Who
anything before
hey,
I
you
oh, go ahead.
no, you had me at fun. If it's fun,
Okay, cool.
well, I'm here forever.
We could
Yeah.
jump into fun. I'm assuming that one of the questions involves sour cream, Tom.
Oh, no, I'm gonna leave that one for you.
Okay, okay.
Do you wanna start there? Let's break the ice. You already made
Ross
it
just
weird.
shook it at his head. He's like, "Wow,
Yeah,
this is where it goes
I'm
off the
kinda like,
rails."
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Sour cream.
it, the running theory on the podcast is that sour cream is good on anything that isn't sugary.
Hmm.
Thoughts?
Are you
I guess
are
that's
you
the
looking
That's
for
the
a comment,
thoughts.
or are
Yeah,
you just
that's
stating a
I'm
fact?
just we need to know Ross's opinion on sour cream.
Uh, well, I gotta start with the baseline is I don't use sour cream a lot. Like, I'm not a, nachos gonna needs lots of sour cream. I'm pretty wimpy when it comes to sour cream, but the
Wimpy.
idea of sour cream on something sweet does not appeal to me.
No, that's why I excluded off the list. I used to say sour cream is good on everything, but then somebody brought up cereal and I was like, "Ooh, no, that sounds disgusting. That doesn't sound like a good time
Yeah,
at all."
yeah.
So,
No, no,
yeah,
no.
well, you guys would share a table really well because DJ is going to take all the sour
all
cream,
of it.
but you like the concept of sour cream. There you
The
go.
Yeah,
concept.
Match made
yeah.
in heaven.
And what about you, Tom?
Yeah, I'm indifferent. I would prefer it, but if it costs extra, I'm not going to have it. How about
Wow.
Wow.
that?
Wow. Okay, what do we learn about, Tom's spending habits?
Yeah, I'm a cheap bastard. That's what I am.
Apparently sour cream's not worth it. Me and Tom are fighting
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Our friend Matt Busby at Thunderhill wants your favorite story or any story about driving the Ferrari 333 SP.
Ah, favorite story would be driving it the very first time. The very first Ferrari 333 that came into North America was serial number 3, and I drove that at Road Atlanta, and it was sort of a favorite and non-favorite all in one race because I handed it off to my co-driver in the lead, and we finished 5th or 6th. Um, and I'll just kinda leave it there. The
Oh,
I'm gonna say probably my favorite one was, racing the 333 in a Grand Am race in Trois-Rivières, Quebec on the street circuit, and it's that car right there, the Lista one. My co-driver Didier Tays, he and I drove that, and, uh, that car had such a sweet sound, and it was it was more nimble than the other cars that we were racing against, the Riley and Scotts at the time, and on a street circuit, it was just a hoot of a car, and when you heard that V12 kinda echo off the walls as you're driving it, it was just, pretty sweet. I guess one other quick little thing is that first weekend that, uh, it was that 1994 when they introduced the 333 and at Road Atlanta, and on Saturday night, Ferrari held a dinner for the drivers that were going to drive it because it was gonna be the very first, Ferrari sports car since, like, the early '70s. So it'd been 20 something years or something. And uh, the president of Ferrari North America presented us, each driver, with a little tiny little solid gold prancing horse. And I still have that today on the frame of a painting that I have of the 333. So
Oh,
yeah, a
that's
lot of
that's awesome.
amazing questions. So Matt, thank you for asking that question because I'm gonna smile for the rest of the day now.
that's that's awesome.
Yeah.
I was going to piggyback and just ask, what's your favorite car that you've driven? But is
The
that the
next
same
one.
answer?
The next one.
Ah,
No,
good one. I like it.
yeah, I've driven a lot of different cars, but to this day, I still, yeah, I mean, just doing one lap, right? And that Civic Type R, what a hoot of a car. Um, and it's going to be my favorite last one until I drive the next car, which will
I
be,
love that answer.
yeah,
That
uh,
is the only right answer to that question.
yeah, yeah. I mean, how do you compare, a 333 with an Indy car to a, uh, actually, no, I got it. The other night, I'm with Sam Smith, who is my co-host on It's Not the Car, um, former road and track writer, and we're with another road and track, ex road and track writer. I got to go and do the road and track performance car of the year test at Thunder Hill in 2018, 2019, 2019, I think it was. And we had the new Corvette, the C8, before it was launched. We had Lamborghini, a McLaren, a Miata, a BMW. I can't remember what it was, a Supra. We had, I think there was 11 or 12 really cool cars from, yeah, Hyundai, uh, Type N, whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
Um, kind of the spectrum, right? It was like a 2-day event. And on the second day, the editor and Kyle Kennard, because it was his idea, came to me and said, "Here's something we've always wanted to do while we're doing these performance car of the year tests. And it is, look over there. We have 3 minivans that they use for schlepping stuff around and photographers and stuff like this. And they're going, we want to have the performance van of the year test. And
Oh
you
boy.
are the driver. You get essentially 1 lap in each one of them. We were on the west course at Thunder Hill,
That's all the brakes would do.
the tighter, and I had to go out and lap this thing. And of course, just before I go out on the first one of the guys comes over and slaps in a Black Sabbath CD into the thing and cranks it up full blast on, I can't remember what's a Black Sabbath song. And now I'm blasting around the track in these minivans, like launching the thing over the curb. And the guys were talking about the other night about it's up on 2 wheels, it's going over like this. And that night I call my wife and going, it was really fun. She goes, "What's the best car?" And I go, uh, the Chrysler Pacifica.
Wait, that was the best minivan? What minivans were in contention here? Because I would think it would be the Honda Odyssey, having driven some minivans, but like you're the one
So,
actually tracking them.
okay, to be fair, the Toyota Sienna was the best. We had, it was actually, all it was there was a Chrysler Pacifica and a Chrysler Town and Country and a Toyota Sienna. The Toyota Sienna was by far a faster, better van, but despite turning the traction control and everything off when I left,
Mm,
every time I'd go through a corner, it would turn itself back on. So I had to keep reaching down and turning it off after every corner. And that cost me a little bit of time. So
yeah,
the Pacifica or whatever that thing was ended up winning the
because you
lap
could
time.
because you could fully defeat the traction control and stuff.
Yes, turn it off and just launch it and squealing tires
I
and
bet.
howling and so of all the cars that I've driven, I may have laughed more in those laps in those minivans because you drive a car that's meant to be driven around, that's meant to be driven fast. It's just doing its job. Driving something that's not meant to do that, that's fun.
Totally agree. That one of my favorite experiences I've talked about all the time on this podcast is a Crown Vic on snow tires at Mid Ohio.
Oh,
That's
oh,
one of the last times I stayed out the entire session for no reason, other than I was having fun. It
The
was so fun.
the corner
yeah,
workers were cheering for Tom.
Yeah. By the end, there, at a track day, there's no. Yeah, it's
yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny. I mean, at the end of the day, that's why we do it, right? It's fun.
Yeah.
I
And
think
Actually,
when
that.
I
Go ahead, DJ. I was
I
going to cut
think
you off.
Ross might be the only person in the history of the world that has Googled how to defeat traction control and stability on a Chrysler Pacifica.
Well, the unfortunate part is I hadn't been able to do enough research to figure out how to do the pedal dance to somehow
Oh,
turn it all
okay.
off, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because I'm sure there's a way of doing it. I just hadn't got it figured out. So, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
You got to click the seatbelt 30 times in 20 seconds or something crazy.
While holding your breath and poking
Yeah.
yourself in
Yeah.
the ear at the same time. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That brings me perfectly to the last question I had, which is how do you scratch the itch to drive or compete now? Whichever one does it for you. For I think to me it's more driving. I think for DJ it's more competition. But how do you scratch the itch now?
Uh, well, I will say that uh, I, for me, racing wheel to wheel is more important than driving. Like, I take a group of drivers to the Nürburgring in Spa every year. We're going to go in first week of September, and I get to drive a bunch of fun cars around Nürburgring and Spa and take some people for rides, and that's a hoot. I mean, it's just because the tracks are so incredible. That's fun. Uh, I have fun of this old 1969 Lotus Elan that I love piddling around with, and then taking it out on some fun roads just to kind of clear my head. But for me to go to a track and just lap for the sake of lapping, um, personally, it's like, okay, I've done that for a little bit. I'm done. But go to a track, especially an endurance race, and just like go and do a stint in the strategy of cars and, you know, setting up how to be passed, how to pass somebody, like all of that stuff. That's what I love the most. And fortunately, most years I get a request or two to go and do a, last year I did 2 champ car races, did a lucky dog race earlier this year. I'll probably do another champ car or a WRL or AER or something like that. I find all those series are fun just because generally it's a bunch of really good people. It's kind of like doing one lap on steroids, right? One lap is to me, one lap I've done it twice. I've only done it twice, so I'm far from being an old pro at that. But a big part of doing one lap is where else can you hang out with a bunch of weird, crazy, strange people like us? Um, and endurance racing, the same kind of thing. So,
I like it.
The thing I like about one lap, because I've done it twice too, last year and then this year. And the thing I love about it is that at some point during the week, you have been tricked. Your brain is just thinking, I wake up and I drive on a racetrack like just every day. That's my life now. This is how it is. That's my favorite
yeah.
thing about it.
My favorite thing this year was, oh, no, if somebody else has got a chance because Tom's not running this year.
But then Salil still won, so
Yeah,
Salil did
yeah,
still
yeah,
win. It does. I feel like I won vicariously because my teammate still won. This
yeah, 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 yeah.
best case scenario.
Ross, do you remember drag
Uh,
racing a Supra?
yes.
Yeah, I was in the Supra, and when we were doing the burnout, I yelled out my window more than you can afford, pal, but I don't think you heard me.
Well, that was because I had the revs all the way up on the
Yeah,
Civic Type R.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I
All 82 decibels of them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
I don't know
yelled
if you know, but
go ahead.
I got some coaching. I did. So I get
Oh,
there and I'm going for the drag race. And I'm going, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like I don't even know how like sure I've seen this kind of stuff. But I do know Clay Milliken, who's NHRA top fuel drag racer, winner. And so just before as we walked out there, I was like, I called up Clay and I said, Clay, how do I do this? So he told me about how to stage and how to get the thing up and yeah. So I had a little coaching from an HRA top fuel guy on how to do okay in a Type R.
That's how you got as far as you did with an H pattern. At one point in the thing, I didn't even realize I was talking to you, but I was like, how is this Type R? And you were sitting in the driver's seat with your helmet on. That's why I didn't realize it was you. I was like, how is this Type R still in this competition? And you just looked at me and you were like, I just keep launching the car. Like you looked at
yeah.
me like, what do you mean?
I, being naive is probably the best thing you can do as being a driver.
Yeah. So I
Not
kept
having any expectations or it's why 14-year-old kids or 16-year-old kids get into cars and go fast immediately because nobody's told them they shouldn't do that.
I kept cutting
Yeah.
good lights until somebody's like, wow, you're really close to getting a red light. And then my lights sucked after that because I didn't even think about a red light.
Yeah, yeah. I was of all the years that one lap happens, no rain this year, and the drag race happened. I was probably in a car that had it rained at some of the events, we would have done even better. And if the drag race had been rained out, we would have done better because we lost so many points there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excuses,
See, that's
actually one of the most important things as a driver is always have an excuse.
be naive and have excuses. There you
Yes,
go.
yes.
You heard it here.
And
You heard it
and if
here
all else
first.
fails, blame it on everybody else.
Yeah.
And the
Blame it on the
car.
car, blame
Yep.
it on somebody else. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Definitely.
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Should we walk Ross how to do the outro?
Oh.
Okay.
Well, first, no, before we do that, we can't
Oh,
just
yeah,
have
yeah,
him
yeah.
end it because once he does it, it's ended.
It's ended.
Ross,
Yeah.
thank you so much for doing this.
My
We
pleasure.
call you the driver or the coach's coach, not because you're the best coach, but because I think coaches should aspire to look at this the way you do, and that means a lot to us that you've shared a lot of that with us.
Yeah. Thank
Well,
you.
thank thanks for letting me come and play with fellow car geeks. Thank you.
You
Yep.
need to plug anything before we have you make a fool of yourself, unfortunately?
At some point, I gotta plug in my phone. Is that what you meant? No.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, no. Yeah, no. I mean, if I can help anybody, just speedsecrets.com and let me help.
And let him drive your endurance car because Ross needs to drive more than just the 3 times a year.
Yes. I once did a podcast with Andy Hollis and talked about one lap of America. And like within an hour of it going live, I got somebody calling me saying, "Do you want to come and do one lap?" I'm like,
Yeah,
okay. So,
nice.
who knows? My fingers are crossed.
Yep.
Anyways,
Sometimes you just got to put
yeah,
it out
yeah,
into the universe.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the way the outro works is, and I'm gonna play the music so you can hear the music right now, right?
Oh, nice,
Yep. So there's a
nice.
silence right here. So when the silence hits, you say, well, before the silence, but you say, "I love your hair and I hope you win," right as the silence happens, and then the podcast is over. So the way Tom normally does this, he'll like, Tom's so good at this, so we can't even aspire to like the way that he does
I'm
it.
not. I
He'll
miss
be
it
like,
every week.
I had a great time today talking to everyone. And this weekend, I love your hair and I hope you win. And then it'll be silent and then it like the beat drops. Okay. So are you ready?
Oh, the pressure. Whew.
This is part of being a race car driver, isn't it, Ross? You just gotta
Ah.
deliver, right?
So, so the lights come down, do they? Like tick, tick, tick.
Now you're completely set up for failure. All right. Well, good luck, Ross.
Okay. Thank you. I love your hair and I hope you win.